So far, we've only talked about the server side of building cloud-based services for mobile devices. But an important part that we have to consider as well is how does the mobile device communicate with the cloud service? So we're going to look now at the Android side of communicating and interacting with these services. And we're going to use an open source library called Retrofit. Retrofit is produced by Square, which produces these card stripe readers that you maybe have seen on an iPad or another mobile device. And what Retrofit allows you to do is to create a strong interface in Java to your cloud-based service, and then Retrofit will take care of converting any parameters that you pass into interactions with that interface into the appropriate HTTP requests, send those requests to the service, get the response back, and then convert the values back into Java types. So it handles a lot of these complex conversion and checking logic that we saw in the servlet, but it does it on the client side. So let's take a look at what Retrofit looks like and how we interact with it, and it'll make a lot more sense as to what it's doing for us. So let's say that we want to interact with the video service that we just built in the servlet. First we would do is create an interface in Java to represent this service that we're going to interact with. So we'll just call our interface video service. The second thing we need to do is we need to define what are the methods that we can invoke on this service that lives in the cloud that's going to be handled and implemented by this servlet that we just created. Well, the first method is we need to be able to get a list of the videos. So in this case, we're just going to get the list of videos as a string because that's how they were output by that servlet. And we'll call this get videos. And this is going to return the list of all videos that are currently on the server. The second one we want to do is we want to add a method to add a video. And then we're going to need a couple parameters for this thing. We're going to need a string parameter for the name. We'll pass the URL as a string. And then finally, we'll have a long, which we know the servlet needs for the duration. So we've now defined a Java interface which tells us about that service that we're going to be interacting with it. And it provides us a strong interface and strong Java typing for interacting with that service. Now, how do we get from here to HTTP requests that we'd like to send to this service? We would like to have some object that implements the video service interface that we can call get videos on, and it will go and send the HTTP requests, convert the response back into a string, and return it to us. Similarly, we would like to have an object where if it implements this interface, and we can call add video, and we can pass in a name, URL, and duration, and the object that implements this interface will automatically convert that information into an HTTP request, send it to our servlet, and then get the response and let our code know that this method has succeeded in being executed. And this is where Retrofit fills in, is it provides the magic behind this interface that automatically converts this interface into an object that implements the interface and can automatically do everything we just said. It can, when you invoke the get videos method on it, automatically send the appropriate HTTP request to our service. So what we need to do for Retrofit is we need to tell it how to convert a method call on this into an HTTP request on our servlet. And the way we do that is with an annotation. We add the annotation get, in this case, because we want to send a get request, and we know that our servlet was listening to the path /video. So whenever somebody goes and invokes get videos, the Retrofit library is going to look and see, I need to send this as a request, as a GET request, because we're specifying the HTTP method, to the path /video. And we'll see where the server and port and some other information comes in a minute. So here we're telling it, here is how you convert a method call in this into a request. It's going to be a GET request on this particular path, and then take whatever you get back and turn it into a string and pass it back. The add videos gets a little bit more interesting. We now are passing parameters to the servlet. So first we need to tell it the correct method. So we're going to say this is an @post. And this is also going to be to the /video path, which is where the servlet was listing. Except we want this one to be @form URL encoded. So we're telling it that we want it to go and encode the body of this post request using URL encoding. So this is going to look like you're submitting a form on a web page. We then need to tell it how these parameters map into the parameters in the HTTP request. So we add field name. We add @field URL, and then we add @field duration. And so now we've not only created the method, but we've annotated it describing how you convert a method call in this. In this case, when you invoke add video, Retrofit's going to go and see this is supposed to be a post request sent to /video. The body of it should be a form URL encoded body. Then each of these parameters should be inserted into that body in URL encoding. In this case, the name, the value of it should be inserted into the name parameter. The URL should be inserted into the URL parameter, and the duration should be inserted into the duration parameter. So we're basically creating a URL encoded form body, posting it to /video. And Retrofit is doing all of this for us behind the scenes. It's automatically figuring out, based on our interface, how to construct an object that can send these HTTP requests. So this is the first component of building a framework to interact with that video service, is building the interface to describe it, and then giving Retrofit enough information that it can go and translate method calls in this interface into HTTP requests on the actual service. Once we've created this interface to describe our service in Java, we can then use the Retrofit library to automatically create an object that implements the interface and will translate all the method calls in that interface into the actual HTTP requests that we described with the Retrofit annotations. So let's look at how we go about creating that object that we're going to use to implement the interface and translate our method calls into actual HTTP requests. So to do that, what we need to do is create a Retrofit REST adapter. And the Retrofit library provides a nice Fluent API. If you're not familiar with Fluent APIs, you can go and look it up, but you'll probably quickly see the API coming forward as I start showing you how to build a REST adapter. And we say new REST adapter .builder. Then we need to tell it where the server is by calling set endpoint. In this case, we're going to say something like localhost. And then we say build. And this tells the underlying retrofit library to actually go and build a REST adapter that has that particular endpoint. Once we've got that adapter, then we can go and actually create an object that implements our video service interface by doing this. We can say video service, and we'll call this service equals, and then we can say adapt, because that's our adapter, dot create, and we pass in video class. And this will actually go and construct an object that implements our interface, but in the background uses Retrofit to automatically translate our calls on that object and those particular interface methods into HTTP requests. And then we could go and say something like this. If we wanted to actually interact with the servlet and get the list of videos, we can just say string videos equals service dot get videos. And we know, because we understand how HTTP works, and we've seen on the server side in particular how much work it takes, the retrofit is actually, the library is doing a huge amount of work for us. It's going and taking this simple method call here, and it's turning it into an HTTP request, sending it across the network, and then when the response comes back, it's automatically extracting the body of that response and converting it into a string and returning it to us. Similarly, we can go and call all the other methods on our interface, in this case add video. We could also say service.add video, and we could pass in a name of our video. We could pass in some URL, and we could pass in a duration if we had some duration for this video. And again, Retrofit's going to go and see this method call. It's going to automatically take these parameters, use the at field annotations that we added to those parameters, convert the method call into an HTTP request, URL encode those parameters into the body of that request, send the request off to the server, and we're on our way. So we're doing a lot of work in our Retrofit library that helps us to send requests and interact with our servlets or the other technologies that we're going to be using to build cloud services. And these types of libraries help us tremendously, because up here we're going from Java all the way to Java, and we're not doing any conversion of our own. But Retrofit in the background is actually going to HTTP and back when we call this get videos method, and it's going to HTTP and back when we call the add video method. So it's doing a whole lot of work for us that's very, very helpful. And we'll talk about how it can get even more helpful later on after we've talked about JSON and data marshaling.